Welcome to another exciting episode of Kevjet, the podcast. I'm excited to introduce to you this week's guest, KV Duong, a London-based artist who examines the complexities of the Vietnamese queer identity through painting, performance, sculpture, and installation.
I'm ready.
You're ready? You have no idea what Kevjet's going to throw at you.
Oh, wow. I don't actually, but we'll see how it goes.
KV tells us about his family history, his journey to Canada, and how he found the love of art.
My family is ethnically Chinese. We were all born in Vietnam, including my grandparents, my parents, my aunts. Of course, my parents lived through the Vietnam War, and pre that was during French colonial period. We landed March 18, 1987.
Wow.
I saw snow. My cousin opened a bag of Hostess ketchup chips. I studied structural engineering at the University of Toronto, bachelor's and then master's, and then started working. When I came out in 2008, that was still in Toronto. I met lots of different people, meaning a variety of creatives and profession. I found my tribe, and we just started messing around with painting. We call it the Windy Painting Club. There's three of us. I see a path, and finding a path in the art world is the most difficult thing. There's no blueprint, just like trying to win a Grammy or an Oscar. There's no blueprint of that. Doing art, it doesn't feel like a job, and it feels amazing. If I had more time in the day or more days in the week, I would just continuously do art, make art, think about art. It's that obsession that you feel so consumed that when you're doing it, you feel the passion come through.
He describes everything from process to the materials he uses in this fascinating conversation.
Things take a life on its own, especially working with latex. It's like trying to paint on, it's like painting on rubber, or if you think more conventionally, painting on Perpex glass. It doesn't behave, the paint doesn't behave how you always want it to behave. So I go with the flow, and the work carries itself. Sometimes it's more smooth than others.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with KV. Welcome to Kevjet, the podcast, KV, who is a Vietnamese-Canadian, London-based British artist. A lot of words.
Hello, that's me. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
It's a pleasure. And we know each other outside of sort of the podcast world. And it's kind of just going to be great to have a chat with you in this aspect.
I'm ready.
You're ready. You have no idea what Kevjet's going to throw at you.
Oh, wow. I don't actually, but we'll see how it goes.
So tell me a little bit about yourself, KV. You are Canadian, like myself. However, you're Vietnamese, how I also said in your intro. So what brought you to Canada, first of all? Let's talk about that story.
It's a transnational experience, which I guess correlates into my art and how I carry myself. So my family is ethnically Chinese. We were all born in Vietnam, including my grandparents, my parents, my aunts. Of course, my parents lived through the Vietnam War, and pre that was during French colonial period. I was born in 1980, shortly after the Vietnam War, which ended in 1975. We were in the south, in Saigon, or now Ho Chi Minh City. I guess we were on the quote-unquote losing side. So democracy fell. And after the war, about 2 million Vietnamese people fled the country. So my parents had younger kids as us. They're older siblings. They were part of the boat journey in the late 70s and early 80s. So both sets, they didn't know each other. They both sets, one, my dad's side, eldest aunt, made it to Toronto via Badong Island in Malaysia. They were in the refugee camp island for about a year. On my mom's side, they were more fortunate. They were picked up by the ship from Singapore, and they were in the camp in Singapore for 3 months before residing in Calgary, which is where they still are now. So in 1987, the rest of my family, my immediate family, my parents and siblings were sponsored to Toronto. So that's how we ended up in Canada. So as a 7-year-old, I guess it was my first time seeing snow. We landed March 18, 1987.
Wow.
I saw snow. My cousin opened a bag of Hostess ketchup chips,
I love ketchup chips.
opened a can of Coca-Cola. I mean, this was part of my awareness in Vietnam, but I never actually had a touch or taste of it. So all of these things came very new. But 7 years old, I guess you just learn English on the spot. I didn't know any better, so I didn't feel any cultural assimilation or climate shock, culture shock. But of course, my parents, they uprooted our whole family and moved to Canada for quote unquote a better experience for the younger generations of freedom of speech and freedom of mobility and opportunity. So that's how we ended up in Canada.
And how were your parents received? Do they have a different twist to the story? You say you didn't feel the whole culture shock at first. How did your parents feel received?
In Toronto, thankfully, there is a large Vietnamese and Chinese population. So I don't speak Vietnamese anymore. I understand it to the dialect of a 7-year-old. I speak Cantonese to my parents. But my sister, my parents, my aunts, they speak Cantonese, Vietnamese, Mandarin, broken English. So there's these bubbles in Toronto because we're very multi-ethnic. They were able to assimilate quite well locally in that bubble. So within your daily life of shopping in Chinatown, when I say Chinatown, there's Vietnamese people there as well. Doing your grocery shopping, your doctors, everyone speaks your language. And it's only when you have to go out into the working world where you have to cope with public transit and speaking English. I don't know if they're used to the weather yet. It's been so long now. It's something that they have to live with. But my aunts have been back to Vietnam. My parents have not. And it's a fact that my dad was drafted to the war. And I think his mother, his siblings didn't know if he was going to come back. He has glaucoma, which is a blessing in disguise. So he was dismissed from the draft and returned back to the village where we lived. So he has a really sour taste of Vietnam and what happened during the war. As in quote unquote outsider, viewing that part of the history less biased, and I think it's a shit show for both the North and the South. A lot of Vietnamese people died. So I look at it more pragmatically, whereas my parents, they feel a sour taste is their chosen home.
Have you been back to Vietnam? Have you gone to Vietnam?
The first time I went back to Vietnam was in 2011 after I had moved to London by myself for 3 weeks during Christmas for holiday, and it was spectacular. And when we were young, we only moved around. Of course, this was like 1987 and pre, so the technology, and we were also in the lower class income. You couldn't get about that easily. So I remember just Saigon and the probably suburbs. So this is the first time in my life where I've gone to the rest of Vietnam, and it was amazing, is amazing. And since I've been back 2 more times on longer trips with my husband, he also loves the country, the culture, food, people. And of course, he's part of my family now, and he's been immersed in the Chinese and Vietnamese culture in Toronto when we visit, including my nieces, nephew, the rest of my family. So for me as a quote foreigner, it's so weird. I queue up for the visa and the passport says born in Ho Chi Minh City. But it's a country where I feel very at ease, even though I can't communicate very well. But nowadays, you can get by English and using Grab, which is the equivalent of Uber, and a lot of the Google Maps and apps.
So, at what age did you discover art?
I think I was in grade 3, and our like big numbers in A4 sheets or by 11 to color, and I added caricatures. I added hands, legs, hats, smiley faces. I think I did about 2, and I didn't, that was just intuition. And then at the end of the session, the teacher just showed a few. We're all sitting on the carpet, cross-legged as I do. And she was just going through it, and I was oblivious, just chatting with my friends, and it's like, oh, but these are really creative. And she showed up my 2 sketches. Oh, that's funny. I mean, I guess that's creative, but I didn't really think otherwise. So that was my first recognition that I maybe think differently than the average kid. And art didn't come into the realm of a possible career until much later in life. I studied structural engineering at the University of Toronto, bachelor's and then master's, and then started working for 4 years, got chartered, and then moved to London in 2010 as a structural engineer. So I came on a working visa through that. When I came out in 2008, that was still in Toronto. I met lots of different people, meaning a variety of creatives and profession. I found my tribe, and we just started messing around with painting. We call it the Windy Painting Club. There was 3 of us. My friend Hao's psychiatrist's office, and we just went there on a Tuesday evening and just painted and played. And that was really the restart of that. And I think 2012, 2013, I started picking up again. I started picking up art again leisurely while doing full-time work in the evenings on the weekends. And it wasn't until I remember June 2016 where I was shortlisted for the Derwent Art Prize, which is a semi-prestigious prize. And my first public exhibition was in September 2016, and that was the first of many to come. The door, someone showed me the gap to the door, and I ran through it.
Amazing. And so art is kind of become your full-time job now, hasn't it?
Well, I've taken a year sabbatical leave to do my MA in painting at the Royal College of Art, which I'm just finishing up now. I think starting September, I'll go back part-time, and I'll see how long I need to do that until I can make a sustainable living as an artist. And thankfully, through the exposure of the degree show and the subsequent weeks following, and through just developing the craft over the past year, I've seen a noticeable step change in my practice and also the recognition from the wider artistic world. So the next few months in this autumn coming will be quite interesting. There are a lot of things lined up, and I'm just going to continue working hard and pushing forward to see what the future brings. But I see a path, and finding a path in the art world is the most difficult thing. There's no blueprint, just like trying to win a Grammy or an Oscar. There's no blueprint of that. Sometimes it's luck. Actually, a lot of times it's luck, but also skill and dedication and showing up. So showing up the past year, well, many years before that, but showing up particularly the past year, 7 days a week during the MA has really bear its fruit.
Amazing. We were at an art exhibit the other night. And so that just brings me back to, how did you feel the first time somebody said to you, I want to show off your art. We'll have like an art exhibit on this evening or on this day, or I'd like to hang your painting in a public space. How did that make you feel?
When I walked into the tech office, And I've worked with Artique, who's the art consultancy involved with this project. I mean, at this point, I've had many exhibitions and many public talks, so I felt very comfortable and at ease. But I walked into the ground floor foyer, which is the public building there on the third floor, and I saw this poster, "An Evening with KV Duong." I was like, oh, that's very flattering. And I'm wearing shorts because it's summer and I'm in the studio prior. And I go up into this very nice office and they're serving nice cocktails. And the place was just so well organized and people came to see me. And I felt really flattered, privileged to be in that position. And I felt almost like an intruder. And it's like you're having an outer body experience going to a movie premiere that's your movie and you're thinking, well, who's coming to, like, all these people came to see me.
It was a great evening, and I felt like when you arrived, it almost felt like you were the celebrity who arrived. I felt like we needed to have the red carpet.
Yeah, again, it's a bit surreal, flattering, and I'm really appreciative of everyone who came. And the time is precious, and for busy people like you and I, time is probably the most precious thing in our lives. So having people show up and commit really means a lot to me.
How do you divide your time between your work and your private time?
I think since COVID and working from home, I've had the same routine. My partner wakes up at 5:30. I wake up at 6:30, and we try to go to bed by 11:30. And I've kept this routine during the MA, just waking up at 6:30 to keep that same consistency, even though our studio doesn't open till 9. But I don't really have a set schedule like my partner does. I try to fit in as much during that day and push forward. I think showing up with intent, you get used to it, you get used to the work ethic, and it just becomes a second nature. So I would wake up, do my morning stretches now because I'm 43 and my lower back is aching. I'm sitting on a bouncy football. You don't see that. And just get a quick breakfast and start doing admin, and then go to the school and do studio work. If there's events in the evenings, which normally 2 or 3 during the week, that's when we go out and meet people, network. It's like a small business, socializing, supporting your fellow peers, going to openings of artists that you look up to, or galleries that you're trying to follow, or meeting curators and gallerists. If that doesn't happen, then I stay at the studio later, or come home and do admin. And when I say admin, there's a lot of Photoshop, website, emails, correspondence, research, thinking. I categorize all that as admin, and then the rest of the studio time, which is maybe only 20 to 25% of my time. And then I try to play tennis once a week because that is my stress relief, and go to the gym once a week. And my partner also has a very busy schedule. So we allot at least one date night on the weekend, and that's usually a Friday evening, but sometimes on the weekend as well. And then sometimes, if we're lucky, we have 2 date nights, but then we see each other in the morning and in the evening, and messages during the day. So that's the split of my working/private life. But, doing art, it doesn't feel like a job, and it feels amazing. If I had more time in the day or more days in the week, I would just continuously do art, make art, think about art. It's that obsession that you feel so consumed that when you're doing it, you feel the passion come through. And during the last month before our degree show and during degree show, it was really irritating actually, because the days were getting longer and wake up at between 3 to 5 by the sun and not be able to fall back to sleep because you're just so alive. Your brain starts thinking, and At some point, at like 5 or 6, I just get up because I'm lying on the bed for an hour and not falling back to sleep. And I just said, I'm getting up and I'm going to start.
Wow. I want to talk about the materials, but I also want to ask when you realized that your art was representing your identity.
I think prior to this year at the Royal College, I've been quote unquote a self-taught artist. And there's a lot of liberty in that you can experiment and play without eyes watching you, and you're free to discover your voice. And my art making to a singer-songwriter where they write about their life experience or their interest and what they're passionate about. And growing up and living in 3 distinct continents and having such a rich in terms of content of history of the Vietnam War colonial past, but also growing up in Canada and then moving to the UK, of having the experience of cultural assimilation, culture shock. I didn't feel culture shock moving to Canada, but I definitely felt culture shock moving to England in 2010 when I was just about to turn 30. And that really surprised me. And then I can think, wow, my parents must have felt way more when they moved to Canada. So I'm mining and excavating all of this past history through my own lived experience and through my family and the wider Vietnamese and Southeast Asian cultural. And I realized that history is actually very interesting and it's what I know best in my life. So I'm using that as the identity, the Vietnamese queer identity in the art. So that is the basis of what I'm doing with my work. And then progressively, you become more universal, speaking about the human condition. And when I'm doing works about the boat journey of Vietnamese people situated within Europe, of course, there's the migrant crisis and the war, the evacuation that happened in 1975 in the fall of Saigon. There were images of the evacuation in Afghanistan where there's side-by-side images that they're so coincidence, ironic.
And so how does that correlate with the materials that you use? Because they sort of flow in with what you just explained.
I'm working with latex now, and it's a new material that I started during the MA, but even before this, and I wouldn't say I'm finishing at the painting program, but I paint with a quote P because I also do body painting performances, installations, sculptures, drawings. I think for me, I view myself as an artist, and whichever media happens, it could be practical cost, but whatever media comes out that best translates the ideas, I follow that intuition. And using different materials with the various media helps to construct a distinct voice. And having a background in structural engineering, which is the key role of a structural engineer, is to make use of the materials to the best of their ability, whether structural steel, concrete, wood, or timber, masonry. We understand the properties of those material and put it into a building or a bridge or whatever infrastructure and make the best use of it. So I'm very used to handling material and experimenting and investigating. Perhaps it's the aesthetics of industrial material that I grew up with and learned to work with that has informed the choices of the materials that I pick. So latex is a very wonky, it biodegrades. There's a lifespan to it, which is a risk, but also an advantage, I think. At the moment, I'm adding a layer of resin to the back of the latex to try to prolong the lifespan of it, and I think it's working. But back to your initial question of how the material reflects conceptually with the practice. So latex comes from the rubber tree, and for our viewers who don't know what that means exactly, if you think of tapping sap or syrup from the maple tree. So did I say maple tree or rubber tree? Latex comes from the rubber tree, which is like tapping syrup. So you do it in the morning. You groove, cut grooves into the bark of the rubber tree, and this white, thick, smelly liquid comes out of this giant trunk. So already it's referencing the queer LGBTQ plus culture of latex condoms, identity politics. But the rubber trees were exploited during French colonial period of Vietnam. So that using this latex material references both a colonial past of Vietnam and the queer culture, which is the two prominent themes of my work.
How is the queer community accepted in Vietnam?
I can only answer as a tourist because I haven't lived there as a local. And it's weird. When I spoke to the locals, I think it's okay. It's not criminalized. I have to check if it's legal to be married. I'm not sure yet, but I know that the apps happen and people stay over at each other's homes. Maybe it's just like a bro thing. I don't know how the female community works, but when I went 14 years ago, people had like friends stay over, a guy friends stay over. It's very common in their family home. So whether or not they're doing gay things, the parents don't know. So there is a community now with the smartphone. It feels like you can carry on with your life.
Okay. So when you're creating art and it's related to your identity, it's such a mixed international world, isn't it? That's happening. And while you're creating art, do you have something in mind while you're doing it? Is there a plan? Or do you just let whatever happen, do you let it flow?
It depends on the type of work. For the more abstracted body painting pieces, so my recent latex doors, some are more figurative, some are architectural spaces, and
which are my favorite, I just have to add.
Thank you. And some are they stem from body painting. So I actually did a performance at the Royal College degree show where I painted for about 5-10 minutes live in front of the audience. So most of that comes from an intuition, and when you're performing live, you're responding with the audience as well. And you can't quite plan that too much because you're painting with your body on your floor, so you don't have a bird's eye perspective what you're exactly doing. But having done that over the past year, and I've performed since 2017, so there is an awareness of my body movement and what part of my limbs and hair follicles create the marks that I do. So some of it is semi-planned, some of it is on the spot. So that's to answer for the body paintings. For the more architectural and narrative-based ones, I normally do studies first, or I use Photoshop to come up with a rough idea of what I'm going to paint, and then I'm going to paint over it. But part of working with latex and having an abstracted point of view as well, things take a life on its own, especially working with latex. It's like trying to paint on, it's like painting on rubber, or if you think more conventionally, painting on Perpex glass. It doesn't behave, the paint doesn't behave how you always want it to behave. So I go with the flow, and the work carries itself. Sometimes it's more smooth than others. Other times there's a struggle period, and then the work finishes when I think I have nothing else to say with the piece.
I loved the piece with the portrait. at the tech event. Do you want to explain how that was created?
That is a old image, I think when I was 6, of a family photograph of my siblings and I, diluted on Photoshop to make it into like a ghostly figure. And that was actually UV printed at the Royal College onto the latex surface. And then I mounted onto the wooden shutter and then enhanced the shading and such afterwards.
It's a stunning piece. It really is.
Thank you.
We can talk about the one with you and your partner, the image of you and your partner. Is that printed the same way?
It is printed the same way. And then now I'm creating more of these iterations over them as well. This series of photos were taken during the first lockdown in London, May 2020, where the restrictions were super tight, no visitors allowed. So I believe it was on the weekend, and I don't even know if we were allowed out at this point. So I ordered a DSLR camera online. It arrived and I put it on the self timer and we cleared the living room and just messed around, took some photos of my partner and I with paint and without paint. The photos look quite serious, but we were having a giggle.
It does look very serious. Yeah, it does.
It does. But I guess suppose there are the off cuts where we were smiling and laughing and stuff, right? But that didn't make it into the maybe what. But those were just to share an experience with him, have some fun, some creative outlet during this very weird period in everyone's lives. And I wasn't sure if something would come out of it. I've done iterations in smaller pieces, like the size of A4, and it wasn't until these large doors where they took on a life-size scale. And between May 2020 until now, 4 years later, my partner has become more relaxed of me using an image with his face, particularly his eyes. They really gaze back at the audience. I think when we first did that, he said, "Oh, it's okay if you keep that privately or just, obscure it." And I think he's less fussed about it now. So, I mean, everyone who came through the degree show saw that work with his eyes glaring back at us. So that was the start of that series. I've run out of photos from that series that can be used now. So we're going to have to get naked again over the next year and take some more photos.
Such a shame, isn't it? I love them. They're stunning. They're absolutely stunning. And I love the whole concept.
Thank you.
What do you think about AI?
I'm actually using AI. Well, I use ChatGPT daily to help correct grammar, just try to help me write, just to make it more efficient. The writing turns out to be my own word, but it just a robot helps you proofread. So that part of AI I use a lot. In terms of art, I have used AI because a lot of the archive scenes from Vietnam during the war, they're copyright. And I've struggled with that in the past of, should I use this? But now you can put it into AI and ask it to do an iteration or variation of that. And then I can use that with more liberty. Also generating ideas of scenes. I've experimented with putting prompts into AI and see what it comes out. So there's a piece called Individual Houses on a Rolling Green Hill. And that came from a prompt of isolation, cultural submission, individual houses on a rolling green hill. And it spit out this image, which I thought was very uncanny, and I painted it.
Amazing. There's so many different thoughts about AI, and everybody that I've had a conversation with find the positive in it, which I love.
I think as an artist, well, I mean, who knows, maybe in 10 years they'll do things that are super amazing. They probably will, but the voice is always here. I don't feel insecure with AI, and I'm actually going to use it as a tool, just like Zoom, just like the iPhone. to work and to help with the practice to be more efficient and creative.
Sure. So let's move into the Kevjet quick fire questions. You ready for
I'm ready.
this?
I am.
Right. Alrighty. Favorite book?
I'm a really bad reader. I would have to say the first 3 Harry Potter books.
Best gift you've ever received?
Friendship.
Ooh, I love that answer. Name a person you'd love to have coffee with.
Sam Kiefer, who's a very well-known German artist.
Trump or Camilla?
Camilla.
Bath or shower?
Shower. There's no time for bath. Just my lifestyle. There's no time for bath.
If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Travel through space, not space. Time, space warp. What is that? How do I call that?
Time warp?
Not
or
time warp.
Space travel or a time travel?
Just being like click a button. I can be in Toronto.
That would be amazing.
Just like those portals in Harry Potter where you can go from one place to another.
The next version of FaceTime.
Yes.
What does pride mean to you?
Showing up and creating space, not claiming space, but creating space for yourself and for others to join you.
Most use emoji.
Recently, the one with the lung where that blows out, it's almost like, well, you don't see this in but that type of like, oh my god, that like I can't believe that just happened.
I love that. What does success mean to you?
Sustainable art practice.
What qualities do you value in people with whom you spend time with?
Genuine. Being genuine.
What are you most afraid of?
Probably failure, which has kept me going.
What qualities do you most admire about your parents?
Work ethics.
Do you believe in past lives?
Yes.
What is your guilty pleasure?
Ooh, almond croissant. I would have that daily, but I had high cholesterol 2 years ago, not knowing, and then I've had to reduce to 1 pastry per week, sort of.
Sort of. I like that answer. What is your most used app?
Instagram.
Do you TikTok?
No. I tried. There's too many things to deal with.
What is your favorite meal?
With my partner.
What is your very favorite Canadian memory?
God, there's so many phases in my life of either growing up as an adolescent or now coming back to visit my family. I guess I would have to say the more recent ones, just post-COVID, when I was able to visit for the first time after a year and a half or 2, and just seeing everyone.
I love that. That was my favorite thing as well. Describe yourself in 3 words.
Restless, driven, generous.
If you
generous, but discerning.
Very good. If you could change one thing in the world right now, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, it's between world peace and climate change, and I don't know which one's more urgent.
Agreed. What inspires you to get out of bed each morning?
Making work, thinking about work, playing tennis today. So that got me out of the bed too.
And we have
And
such.
this podcast, of course.
Oh, thank you. If you could relive one day in your life, what would it be?
That day is yet to come, Kevin.
Like that answer? I think we need to do another podcast.
Mm.
Describe your passion in one word.
Scorpio trait.
What does the word love mean to you?
Family. And that includes my partner, of course.
And the last question is a question I ask every male guest I have. What does being a man mean to you?
Being able to be completely comfortable in my own skin, in my sexuality, how I carry myself, how I speak, and how I present myself to the world.
Love that. Thank you, KV. It was wonderful to speak to you.
Thank you, Kevin, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.
You definitely will. I'm not going anywhere.
Hello to everyone in Canada and in the UK who may be tuning in.
Amazing. Watch this space because they'll be seeing lots more of you.
Thanks, see you soon.